Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this webinar on Awards for Excellence in Learning Analytics, which is an information session. I'm Alan Song, the facilitator for this webinar, and currently serving as part of the ASCILITE executive and co-organizing this series of ASCILITE webinars this year with my two other ASCILITE members, Mark Nichols and Chris Campbell. Now this morning we are very glad to have Simon Welsh as well as Dr. Abelardo Pardo. Let me introduce them. Simon Welsh is the Manager, Adaptive Learning and Teaching at Sturt University. He's responsible for leading the implementation of the university's Learning Analytics program, including technical implementation, research and organizational engagement. Now, Dr. Abelardo Pardo is a senior lecturer in the School of Electrical and Information Engineering, University of Sydney. He specializes in technology-enhanced learning with emphasis on learning and behavioral analytics, computer-supported collaborative learning, and personalization of learning experiences. For this morning's 1-hour webinar, both presenters will take about half an hour or less, and the remaining time will be open for question and answer session. Now, during the question and answer session, you can either post your questions in the chat box or click onto the hand raising button located on the left right below the image box, and I will give you the right to speak. Now, when speaking, you can click onto the talk button. After speaking, you can release the talk button again. Now, without further ado, please help me to welcome Simon and Abelardo.
Cheers, thanks Alan, and thanks everyone for taking the time to be here today. When we do these sorts of things, which are a little bit different to some of the things that happen, we always hold our breath that people are going to be interested and people are going to come along. So thank you for that. Alan, before we go too much further, I might get you to give Abelardo moderator rights. So he can speak and say good day to folk as well.
Oh yes, yes. Give me a minute. Oh yes, that's right. I've given the rights.
Beautiful.
Hello everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here in the seminar. Really glad to see some familiar names in the audience, and yeah, like Simon said, really happy to see this interest in the area and see if we can share some interesting initiatives.
Terrific. And Abelardo and I haven't really sort of rehearsed this today. We just wanted to sort of keep this an informal chat. But it's very important that Abelardo have microphone on, because I'm going to let all the hard questions go through to him. So think of tough questions and we'll direct those to Abelardo. So thanks Abelardo, thanks for making it back. I know you were pushed for time this morning, so I appreciate that. What I thought we'd do today is just talk through the awards program information document, which is available on the website, and I'll come back to that in a moment, and so forth. We're not going to read this to you, but rather just talk about some of the thinking that's behind it. I don't think it'll take us half an hour to get through this, but we'll see how we go. So I might just go way back to the start, and Abelardo may even want to jump in here as well, because he's sort of been involved with this longer than myself. But and just talk for a moment about the special interest group, the Learning Analytics Special Interest Group within ASCILITE. So this was something that was established, I think it was towards the end of last year. There was certainly a session on it at the ASCILITE conference last year over in Dunedin for those who were there, sort of thinking about what could we do with this group. And that's something that we've been thinking about since. And I suppose a lot of our thought has been around how can we do something with this group that is different to but complementary to the stuff that's coming out of SOLAR, without wanting to duplicate the great resources and the great activities that are there within SOLAR. For those of you who may or may not know what SOLAR is, just in case, that's the Society of Learning Analytics Research. They've got a fantastic website with a ton of resources on there from previous conferences, and they've got a journal of learning analytics and those sorts of things. So we really didn't want to duplicate that work. But we wanted to do something also that was meaningful and deliverable within the kind of the constraints and resources that we had. So a lot of the things I think that came out of the discussion in Dunedin last year were very big and very far-reaching. And it's not to say that the SIG won't pick those things up, but we needed to get something to get it rolling. And this is where our thoughts sort of started to lead to around the awards program. But the SIG more broadly exists in its own right. It has a Google group, which I can show you here, and there's a link to this off this document here, but the Google group, the Google group here just sits in, and that's just a self-enroll Google group, the ASCILITE Learning Analytics SIG. If you want to join that, you can see there's a thread about the awards program. There's threads here about events that we'll be holding over the coming period. There's even just a chat session. So there's a space there to sort of create a bit of a community of discussion and so forth. Then the SIG, you can access the SIG website through the ASCILITE site in two ways, either through the special interest groups Get Involved section or just more directly from the Learning Analytics SIG link there. And as you can see here, it tells you a little bit more about the SIG itself. Those of us who have volunteered to sort of try and kick things along, ways to get involved, and again just sort of repeats this link to the Google group. There'll be events coming up, some learning analytics resources here, and a page about the awards, which I might come back to in a moment. But Abelardo, did you want to add anything about the SIG and what it's trying to achieve at all?
Well, I think that pretty much covers it. I think it is important what you just mentioned, Simon, that this is a little bit of an attempt to expand a little bit the interest within the area of learning analytics. And even though there are these other international institutions, we felt that there was also this community or this large portion of people interested within Australia, and the proof of it was last year's session in ASCILITE. So yeah, that's why we decided we needed to push it a little bit more, and yeah, the next steps or the next initiatives that Simon is going to describe is a little bit that vision that we need to. I think there is value on nurturing this community and exchanging ideas and projects. Back to you, Simon.
Cool, thanks, Abelardo. Yep, and I just got an email notification there of someone just signed up to the Google group, so that's fantastic. Thank you for whoever that was. I'll go back and have a look later, because we've got the analytics. We can check these things out. So yeah, so the SIG, we were thinking, well, what is something tangible that we could do? And I suppose there was two main drivers that kind of led us down the path, and I might just talk about this because it's often useful when you're thinking about your submission to think about, well, where is it these guys are really coming from? And I suppose where we were really coming from was two things. One was we wanted to genuinely sort of broaden the field of view, I suppose, in some ways about who's active in this space and the kinds of things that they're doing. And this thinking sort of came out of even out of the conference at ASCILITE last year, where there were so many people talking about the cool stuff that they're doing in this learning analytics space, that we wanted to, in some way, give a space and give a voice to as broad a range of people who are doing work in this area as we could. And it didn't have to be incredibly technologically complex stuff. We wanted to talk to people particularly who are using learning analytics in practice, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. So that was one driver, was to sort of broaden the exposure, I suppose, of people and the things that they're doing. And the other thing that was a major driver for us was the idea of using this awards program as a way of developing a kind of resource library. And again, I'll talk about this when we get to the sort of the submission requirements, nuts and bolts of that, but that's very much what's behind the way in which we've looked at setting up the submissions, is wanting people to create, as we'll talk about, these kind of short kind of video, audio pieces that we can use as a library. So rather than having to ask people to write long papers and therefore having to ask people to read long papers and those sorts of things, we wanted to make some really digestible, short kind of resources that would share knowledge, share information about who's doing what in a very palatable way, and bring that together through an awards program, and then of course recognize people who are doing some outstanding things. So that was kind of what's behind this awards overview. So it's very much about learning analytics in practice, as distinct from, well, as distinct as you can make it, and I do appreciate that the two overlap, but as distinct from pure, if I can use that word, research in learning analytics. So if you think about that distinction of learning analytics in the labs versus learning analytics in the wild, we're trying to focus more on learning analytics in the wild. And again, that's just because we want to complement the stuff that Solar's doing, and Solar's got its Journal of Learning Analytics there, papers and conference papers and those sorts of things, which very much focus on that research end. We wanted to try and steer more towards that practice end. So that's where we're coming from when we talk about the practical application of learning analytics. We want to talk about things that are actually being done with learning analytics today in the wild to help students, to help teachers to be more effective in what they're doing. Abelardo, do you want to add anything to that?
No, perhaps emphasize a little bit the practical notion. One of the issues that we have found in the community of learning analytics is that it is a very broad community. Typically, a lot of people from different areas have a lot to say about what they're doing. So we need to make an effort to be very, very inclusive. And this is something that has been discussed at length in some other international groups. So the idea or the driver behind this type of initiative is precisely to be very inclusive. And like Simon said, I mean, if we go and aim at very mature or sophisticated research initiatives, then we will have certain type of audience. But we felt that there was a little bit of a need for more practical type of experiments, practical initiatives out there, which we know there are plenty of them, and perhaps they do not have the right forum to be presented. So that's a little bit the angle that was at the beginning of these discussions that we have for quite some time. And yeah, we try to convey that notion so that we get quite a lot of people showing up at ASCILITE and try to get this philosophy going.
And of course, that's not to say that if you've done something, a practical application of learning analytics, and you're looking to write that up as a research paper on that practical application, that certainly doesn't exclude that from what we're talking about here. It's the application that we're interested in. So I'll move down. Now we start to get into I suppose the stuff that's probably of most interest to those of you who are going to apply, timelines. So as you can see, the submissions close on Friday the 11th, so close of business on Friday the 11th of September. The reason that we've done that is that'll enable us to do the judging period and announce the finalists in time to still get the early bird discount for the conference. Because one of the things that we're sort of absolutely dedicated to is the idea of those of you who are successful in making through as finalists, that you come to the conference, and we'll be asking you to present in a little more detail your project at a session at the conference. So we want you there, we need you there. So we've set the submission dates around the time to be able to enable those finalists to still get an early bird discount on the conference. So what are the submission requirements? Well, as I mentioned, so it's really a big driver in this for us is building that resource library to tell the story of what's happening around the place with learning analytics in practice. So we're looking for, we've called them Pedagogy style presentations. We certainly don't want to strictly follow, I think, some of those quite restrictive rules of the Pedagogy kind of pure model. Or what we mean by that is we're looking for something where it's basically kind of a voiceover to a slide presentation, but please feel creative if you think you can come up with something a little bit more fantastic than that, and if you want to include some animation or video, whatever, terrific. But that's sort of the basic idea. So the bare minimum would be a kind of a 5-minute narrated presentation. between that sort of 10 to 15 slides. And as we say, there's no per slide timing like there would be with a pure kind of Pedagogy. I think it's up to you. You could spend, you can have 10 slides and spend 5 minutes on the first one and then whiz through the others. So, sorry, spend 4 minutes 30 seconds on one and then whiz through the others. But we want that 5-minute duration, and the reason for that is not just because we've got to evaluate all these things, but genuinely because we want these bite-sized, digestible things that folk would be more inclined to have a look at and watch, 5 minutes while they're having their coffee, rather than sort of 15 minutes eating into people's days. Yeah, Danny, if videos are okay, if you can get it into that kind of 5-minute max format. It's still got to be that sort of 10 slide minimum kind of thing. If you can embed the videos and all those sorts of things, that's fine, terrific. No limitations on your creativity there. So what we want then in terms of those slides, if you think about how to lay them out, what we're thinking is, that there needs to be some kind of discussion of the situation. This was the issue. This was the problem. This is what we were this is what we were setting out to do. An overview then of the practice. This is what we did. And then, of course, any evaluation kind of information that we have. This was the impact. So this is what happened as a result of what we did. So it's pretty straightforward, I'd say there. And when you send them through, this is an important bit as well. Those submissions, if you could just send us a link, not a copy of the file itself, but just a link. The reason for that is within that ASCILITE website, if I just pull this back up, within our SIG website, and I don't think it's live yet, but if you go through, so there'll be an awards page you can see here on this is on the SIG website in the ASCILITE site. You can see here we've already got our Awards for Excellence page up. And again, this sort of information here, there's links here that can tell you a bit about Pedagogy. There's a copy of this document that we're talking to, a link to that here somewhere. I can't quite put my finger on it just straight away, but there's a link here. I might be back on the first page of this document. But here, watch award applicants here beginning in August 2015. So as your submissions start to roll in, there will be another page that will be created here that will become this library. So the reason we just want a link is we want to be able to put that link up, maybe with a very short descriptor, and when you make your submission of your awards proposal, you'll be asked for I think it's a 50-word or something quick description of your project, and so that the link and the descriptor will go on this page that will become the library for these things. So that's why we just want to link, because we don't want to be overstaying our welcome on the ASCILITE site by filling up their site with lots and lots of media-heavy resources and those sorts of things. So a link out was decided to be the easiest way. If you do, I think it talks about in here, one way of doing that is to use AuthorStream. That's just a site that enables you to easily post narrated PowerPoints, and they will just post up and click on the link, and they'll play as a slideshow with your narration over the top of it. That's just an easy way of doing it. If you do use that, if you could just make sure when you are saving things down to save them down as publicly available, not privately available. Just to quickly show you AuthorStream before we go. Let's see if this will work. Unrehearsed. Let's see how we go. So yeah, here it is. It's just a real easy thing. It's completely free for the basic thing, and you can just go in, upload your presentation, and as I say, that'll sort of does all the things that it needs to do in the background. So you'll have a narrated slideshow just appear. We'll give you a link. Just send us the link. And yeah, please use a microphone or something when you're recording, because we've got to be able to hear what you're saying. So that's really what that's about. So I might just see if Abelardo, you had anything to add about the submission requirements at all?
No, perhaps pointing out a little bit this question by Edilson Arenas. The process is open to any university. In principle, the main audience of the conference is definitely Australian and New Zealand, but we're not going to restrict only to Australian and New Zealand universities. In principle, from the submission point of view, anybody can submit any contribution, and then we'll we'll select from that.
And we've made the decision that we'd allow it to also be open to non-ASCILITE members as well. And the reason for that is that we think, there's benefit to ASCILITE members in having access to those resources, but B, it might just encourage some folk to either come to the conference who wouldn't have otherwise come to the conference, or maybe join ASCILITE who otherwise wouldn't have joined. So we think there's a benefit for all in throwing that net fairly broad. So in terms of how to apply, you'll apply through, now which link do I have? This one. You apply through here. So you go to the ASCILITE site, as I mentioned, you come to the Learning Analytics SIG site, you go to the Awards Excellence site, and you'll submit your submission here using this form. And as I say, it'll ask you for this brief description, but you go up to 50 words, the submission link URL, and a little bit about yourself. And then it's that easy to submit. And that'll all come through to us. Oh, and there's the link. There's the link to the document that I'm talking to today. I knew it was there somewhere. So that's a fairly easy process, the actual application process, we hope. So very quickly, eligibility, it must conform to the submission requirements, pretty obvious one. Must be happy for us to use your resources sort of publicly on the website for folk to look at them. And as I mentioned before, if you do become a finalist, the expectation is that you would come to the conference and that you'd be happy to provide a sort of an elaborated presentation on your submission and maybe have some Q&A. And of course, at the conference, the incentive there, of course, is that the conference will be announcing the winner. So if you do become a finalist, there's another incentive for you. And I'll talk a little bit about the prize money in a moment. And please don't sue us because the judge's decision is final. All complaints should be directed to Abelardo. I think that's what we agreed, wasn't it, Abelardo?
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I'll handle those complaints.
Terrific. I'll just quickly talk about the prizes before I get into the judging criteria. So basically, we've got 3 times $300. So we've got 3 finalists, and each finalist will receive $300. That's again expected to be used towards the cost of travelling to the conference over in Perth this year. Beautiful sunny Perth. Now, if you submit as a group, we'd still only be able to give you $300. So you might want to pick someone from in that group who's to use that money for their travel. So we've got $900 in total budget. So we're splitting that across the 3 finalists to get there. So it's $300 in total allocated, even if you're a group. So you can bicker amongst yourselves how you want to allocate that. Now, again, probably something that you're more interested in than some of the other stuff here today, the judging criteria. How are we actually going to evaluate these things? So the first one there, as you can see, impact. So again, going back to that third element of your submission, of your little narrated PowerPoint presentation, we want something that shows that there was actually an impact of this. We weren't just doing this because it seemed like a good thing to do, that there was actually some outcome for sorry, I'll get rid of that. There was actually some outcome for either students or staff. Doesn't necessarily have to be students. It could be resulted in some kind of change in teaching practice or so forth. But there was a demonstrable outcome, something you can point to that changed and improved as a result of this project. Innovation. Innovation, I suppose, is one of those things that's probably easier to talk about what it's not than what it is, because if I could tell you what it is, I'd probably go away and do that project myself. But I suppose what it's not would be something along the lines of, we have been using a pre-built report that was in our Blackboard package, and we haven't been doing anything particularly interesting with it. We've just been using it. Yeah, it might have had some impact, so you could still rate quite highly in terms of impact from something like that, but in terms of the innovation criteria, you might be rated down a bit on that if you're just using something that's a bit out of the box. So we'd be looking for something that's novel, I think is the word we've used there. Novel, different, new, in terms of the technologies employed or the way you've employed it. So it could be that you're using an out-of-the-box kind of thing, but maybe you're doing it in a very different way. Maybe you've used it in a way that the thing kind of wasn't built for, but you found some workaround and made it work in an interesting way. Or it could even be that you are using something that is technologically not that whiz-bang exciting, but the intervention that flows from the use of that thing is a really interesting way in which you're using it. So you might be using a tool that captures data in a quite pedestrian way, but the way in which you've then used that data to make an intervention with student or a change to teaching practice or something is really innovative and interesting in itself. So we're quite broad as to where that innovation could be within that process, but the idea is that there's something in there that's not just sort of run-of-the-mill kind of stuff. We're looking for something that's doing something that's different and sort of, I suppose, adds to practice in that sense. And the final question, criteria here, we've called pedagogy. I suppose what we're really after here is the because. We've done this because, and this is what this criteria is trying to get at. So we want something that's sort of based in theory, in research, in evidence, that there's been a compelling reason why we've done the things that we've done. It hasn't just been done because someone's bright idea or it seemed like a good idea at the time, but there was an intent and a theoretical foundation to what we were trying to do. So that, I think, probably covers off. Abelardo, did you want to add anything to the judging criteria?
One thing that comes to mind might be helpful, and you already touched upon that, but might be helpful for the audience to address it like that. With innovation, one very simple way to convey that is tell us what was the before and after. So if you do have a change in situation, what was the situation before and what is now that I've done this extra work, that probably helps highlighting what is your innovation. And as Simon mentioned before, so situations in which you will already have this report before and this is what we're doing, perhaps doesn't quite fit on that pattern. So yeah, think of something that before we decided to get our hands on this, there was this situation or this issue was approached or dealt with in this way, and after we have done our work, the situation has changed or we're dealing with this differently, and that would probably provide a very good way of highlighting your innovation. Hope that helps. And that's pretty much it.
Brilliant, thanks. Well, there we go. I told you it wouldn't take half an hour, and 28 minutes later, I'm surprised, we've wrapped up. So we might throw open for questions now.
Any questions from the floor? You can either type it in the chat space or you can just hand raise your button.
Some of those criteria.
There seems to be a question from Mark. Yes, he's typing. Okay.
It's Monday morning. Everyone's still digesting their first coffee.
Perhaps one more comment that comes to mind now that might be worth sharing also with the audience here is our intention is for the session itself to become like a bootstrapping process of sorts. In other words, not only just go there, get your pecha kucha, get your point, but also a little bit of a session to probe what are the interests out there, what are the issues, what kind of projects are emerging, and then use that to look a little bit into the future of the group, of the special interest group, and try to guide or reshape or adjust the type of activities that will come out of it. We thought that this competition, actually Simon was the brain behind this competition, would be a great way of exposing what we're doing, but also get the conversation started, get people to discuss these issues and see how we can move forward with the special interest group. So think of it as the initial steps. If you participate, you'll have the honor to be at the very beginning of this very interesting endeavor. And yeah, let's think of that session not only to present each other's work, which is very important, but also to have these type of conversations that will help us decide what.
Cool, thanks. Abelardo, we've got a question here from Sakina. How direct does the impact have to be for practice? I think given the focus of the awards, I mean, it would be possible to still be rated well, and I think, as you say, have something that might be sort of a step away from being a direct practice impact and have a good rating on that. But I think probably to get an extremely high rating, you'd want to be having a direct impact on practice. But I certainly wouldn't let that sort of stop you from having a crack, basically. I think if we can draw a line, or perhaps I should say, if you can draw a line in your submission of how what you've done could impact upon practice, even if it hasn't yet, then that's still going to be, I think, sufficient to get you a pretty good score of your 40 out of 100 on impact.
Yeah, and if I may add, like, for example, an example of an institution. Suppose that one of the issues we are finding also in many contexts that we talk to people especially in universities, is this issue of how do you get the data, how do you handle the data. Sometimes it's how do you integrate different platforms, and those issues are essential for the type of initiatives to be successful. So if you do have some sort of initiative that solves a really tough problem you had in your institution, then all of a sudden perhaps you didn't make it all the way to an impact in terms of the teaching practice, but you see those changes coming very quickly, I think, and that's also worth putting together and submitted to the committee. We'll definitely consider those as well. Like I said before, I mean, this is a very wide area and it touches a lot of disciplines, and none of them is less important than the others. So yeah, we are very open to this type of variety of initiatives. Simon, would you like to summarize the pedagogy judging criteria? Seems like somebody lost that part.
Oh, here we go. Sorry. My chat thing's doing funny things. Could you summarize the pedagogy judging criteria again? Okay, yep, sure, no drama. So yeah, what this was really trying to get at was, as I said, this was really trying to get at the because behind the project. So we did what we did because, and this is articulating the theory or the evidence base that was behind the project and even the way we approached it. So we're looking for something that has a link back to whether we call it learning science or pedagogy or some kind of foundation that was more than just we had this bright idea, or we use this data because we had the data. We're trying to get away from that kind of thing to we use the data in what's the word I'm looking for? With intent, basically, because we had this theory in the background that informed the way in which we wanted to go about this. So it's trying to get to that kind of background, as I say, rather than oh, we just use this because we could, kind of thing.
Perhaps might be worth, if the audience doesn't have any more questions, just to do a quick round of anybody that is considering submitting or anybody that is considering some sort of idea for this type of initiative would probably raise your hand there in the platform, the yes, no button, or any of these. Excellent. Good.
Excellent. Yeah, and a few people have left already, I see. So yeah, so hopefully even a few of those. So that'd be good. That'll keep us busy through the second half of September. Excellent.
Yeah.
Terrific. Well, if there's no further questions, we might hand back to you, Alan.
Thanks very much, Simon and Abelardo, for sharing with us about the guidelines as to what they should be looking out for the awards. And we hope that everyone has found the session useful, for me as well. And we will keep you informed about webinars scheduled in the coming months. So hope to see you again at the next ASCILITE webinar. So bye for now. Thanks very much again.
Correct. Thanks all.
Thanks for participating. Looking forward to meet you there at ASCILITE.
Yes. Give me a minute.